doing my report last week, this is something you guys have been looking into a long time, this property, and I know it involves multiple agencies.
Yeah, it's an area that's an unincorporated part of Utah County near Lehi at the south end of Lehi Center Street, where it turns. The county coordinate there is 8,000 west, and the county zoning officials have been looking at this property for a number of years, many years. We understand. They recently reached out to us because their efforts to get some change there have not led anywhere, and to their credit, they try to avoid uh, coming down with harsh sanctions or fines or things like that if they don't have to. And most people will at least make some effort to comply when they're made aware of zoning violations. And sometimes people who are in violation of certain zoning ordinances may not be aware of that. I don't know in this case if they were aware of that, but they were notified many years ago and have not made any effort or have not made sufficient effort. And it led the zoning officials here in Utah County, along with the Utah County Attorney's Office, to reach out to us to take some enforcement action. And we don't very often get involved in taking enforcement action because, like I say, most people, when they're made aware of a violation or that they're wanting them to come into compliance, they'll take some action at least. The only really kind of ordinance related things we get involved in very often are animal control related, where somebody may have too many animals or they're not caring for their animals or they're letting them run at large, that kind of thing. But one like this, where they're operating a business that apparently, from what we've been told, does not have the proper licensing and is not the right kind of zoning for the kind of business that they're operating there. We got involved. So about a week ago, in fact, a week ago today is when one of our detectives was made aware and had the case assigned to him and went out there to the property. And it was during the course of that investigation that we became aware that one of the operators of the Lehi Farmers Market actually is a registered sex offender and was in violation of his terms. He agreed to be on the Utah Sex Offender Registry. He's on the registry for a violation that occurred in Arizona back in 1995. And as will happen sometimes when somebody moves, their requirement to be on the registry doesn't automatically go away just because they've moved. In fact, sometimes they're restricted from moving, but other times, as apparently in this case, he was allowed to move, but when they move, there's a compact agreement between most states where, hey, we've got this person here on the registry or even just on probation or something. But in this case, on the sex offender registry, who wants to move to Utah, will you guys take his case and do the registry supervision? And so Utah made that agreement, and he is on the sex offender registry here in Utah. But at least several months ago, maybe longer ago, the address that he has listed on the registry as his current address is in Saratoga Springs, but he has been living at this location at about 7,400 north and 8,000 west, which is a county coordinate, and has not updated. Hang on just a second. That's my other phone ringing. Let me start that again. For at least the past several months, Mr. Jarvis has since moved from the Saratoga Springs address and is living at a location at about 7,400 north and 8,000 west in an unincorporated part of Utah County near Lehi, and he has not updated his address on there. And when you're on the sex offender registry, you're required, if you move, to update your address to the new address or any additional address within 3 days of making that change, and he has not done that. The other concern was that this Lehi Farmers Market is obviously they want people to come and spend their money there. They're running it as a business, and among other things, the things they do are activities that cater to children. And when you're on the sex offender registry, you can't be in the presence of children without having written permission from the parents of those children in your possession to accompany those children anywhere. We know that he drives a tractor there that pulls like a trailer, sort of like a hayride that carries children, that he carries children with him on the tractor itself. that he also, there are a couple of pictures that I included with the press release show him holding a child at what is a petting zoo. He dresses up in costume as Elmo, the Sesame Street character. And so those issues are a concern to us. We did make a physical arrest of Mr. Jarvis last Friday and booked him into jail on one charge of failing to update the sex offender registry with his address, which is a third-degree felony, and one count of violation of the area where he's allowed to be because of the children, which is a Class A misdemeanor. He was in jail a few hours, and a judge set his bail at $5,000, and he has since posted that and been released from jail. But it's a concern. Anybody who's on the registry, they're required at least once a year to sign an agreement stating that they understand the conditions of being on the sex offender registry. In this case, when we make arrest, we will very often we will advise somebody of their Miranda rights, meaning their right to remain silent. And we did that with Mr. Jarvis, and he availed himself of that right and chose not to speak to us without a lawyer. Which basically means we don't ask him incriminating questions. We can still ask questions like, who are you, what's your birthday, where do you live, what's your phone number, that kind of thing. And in a case like this, he arguably could even choose not to tell us his address, because that would incriminate him if he told us his address was at the location where we arrested him. But shortly after he was advised of his right to remain silent, he chose to say, without us asking any questions, that he knew that he was in violation of the requirements of the sex offender registry. And obviously, for obvious reasons, it's a concern to us that he chooses to engage in the kind of business that would clearly be designed to attract children. When you're dressing up in an Elmo suit, when you're offering they dropped candy around Easter time out of a helicopter. You do tractor rides and things like that. Those kinds of activities, I don't think anybody would argue that they are not specifically designed to attract children, and that's a major concern for somebody who is on the sex offender registry.
Absolutely. I actually interviewed Dorothy last week. At the time, some neighbors were concerned about some people in that property being on the sex offender registry. They actually gave me a different name and this man's name. They gave me two people. So I asked Dorothy about their concerns. I did not report on it because at that time I only had confirmation from neighbors, which makes sense with your timeline because you guys were probably just starting to look into it.
Yeah, we were just starting it at that point. Yeah. And like I say, we typically the enforcement side of zoning violations, we don't typically get involved with those very much. It's another department within Utah County government that does. But when this one's been going on as long as it has, and they have I essentially refused to make the notified changes. That's when they got a hold of us and said, hey, something needs to be done here. Will you guys do it? And so that's where we got involved. But if you have a name of that other person that somebody gave you, we'd be glad to look into that. If you can text me, because our people might be aware of that, but if they're not, we would certainly like to look into it.
Okay, I can pass it on. Well, last week when I interviewed Dorothy, she was very upset and kind of said she's just trying to give people who don't have a place to stay, and kind of felt bad for her. But this was more discussing the zoning issues. What would you say in response to now this being an actual crime on the
Well, it's disturbing to us that somebody who has been on the sex offender registry as long as Mr. Jarvis appears to have been on it and should clearly understand it, signs an agreement in Utah every year saying that he understands the requirements and the restrictions, yet so carelessly chooses to violate them. I can't imagine him trying to argue that he thought he was okay with what he was doing. And it's not that legally he can't be in the presence of children if he meets certain requirements. Certain family members who aren't victims or victims with their permission, they can be in their presence. Even people who haven't been victimized by them can be in the presence or proximity of a person on the sex offender registry if they have written permission from the parents to accompany their child from one location to another. Now, people may ask, what parent would allow their child to be in the presence of a person on the sex offender registry. That's a parental decision, and the law allows for that. But Mr. Jarvis did not make any effort to do that. It would be difficult, I would imagine, in a setting like that where the patronage for the Lehi Farmers Market is, I would assume, to be rather transient, meaning they come, they may be there for 10 minutes, they may be there for an hour and a half. There's a lot of things they can do. They have wares that are being sold by different vendors and things like that. So it would be hard to get written permission from everyone. If you walk up to somebody who's a customer and they have a small child and you want them to interact with Elmo, but you've got to get written permission from them before you allow the child. Most parents would probably turn around and walk away. I'm a parent. I have young grandchildren now. If I went to something like that and somebody approached me with that, I'd say, see ya. I'm not going to let you be in the presence of my grandchild or my child. So I think it's a concern. The zoning issues, those are a concern at a different level. People need to come into compliance. I think most people understand we would have chaos if there weren't zoning ordinances and laws and people didn't try to comply with them. They're, from what we understand, they're letting people live there in a makeshift kind of a trailer park. There are rules and laws that have to be followed in doing that. And I understand wanting to help people who might be down on their luck or something, but it has to be done in a way that is compliant with existing laws and ordinances.
How does someone with this background get a position like this? Because he's essentially an operator or running the farmers market.
Well, whether or not they have a business license, I don't know. That may be another issue as well. They may well have a business license to operate this, but from what I understand, there are certain rules that you have to comply with, specifically if you're calling yourself a farmer's market. Whether they're in compliance with all of those or not, I don't know. But people start businesses all the time and they don't go about getting all the right permits and licenses to do that, and that can be problematic for them. Somebody just doing some handyman work under the table or something, they're supposed to have a license to do that, and any kind of work like that. Whether these folks have that or not, I don't know, so I can't speak to that, but they clearly enjoy this kind of a thing. It's been going for quite a while, so they clearly have at least some ability to operate a business. They're very active on social media channels, at least on Facebook and Instagram. And so they seem to have a pretty good ability to run an operation, but whether it's being done the right way or not, I don't know. What we do know, though, is that the county officials and the Utah County Attorney's Office had concerns because of zoning violations, and they explained to us what those code sections were and asked us if we could step in and take some enforcement action on that, and we did. The other operator there, I think the woman that you spoke to, the other operator there was issued a citation for the zoning violation, and she'll have to appear in court for that. But it started off with what in reality is a relatively, it's not a dangerous kind of a situation in terms of personal danger to people, but when you talk about a person who is on the sex offender registry, that is a concern for somebody, the personal safety of individuals. And in this case, the individuals for whom we have the greatest concern are children.
Dorothy brought this up last week. This happened a while ago, the incident, whatever he was involved in. Do you think it should follow him all this time?
I'm not the one to make that decision professionally speaking, but personally speaking, in some situations, yes. We know in this case, the incident happened from what we understand, the conviction for which he is on the registry, the sex offender registry, happened in 1995. So that's 27, 28 years ago. And there are some offenses for which a person is convicted and required to be on the registry where it is a limited time period offense. So for example, if somebody is convicted of lewdness, urinating in public or something like that, or urinating in public in front of children, they may be required to go on the registry, the sex offender registry, but that would maybe for a limited period of time. Other kinds of things, if a person, for example, were convicted of rape of a child, and the child is, say, 10 years old, that may require a lifetime registration. And I think, though, that is completely appropriate. Should a person be given the opportunity to become a productive member of society? I think yes. But at the same time, I think it's also important to recognize that some crimes are so heinous that we can't forget what they did while we still give them an opportunity to be a productive member of society. And there are plenty of people on the registry who are good, honest, decent, productive members of society. They may work at a company or a business. They may run their own business. And since the time they got in trouble, they haven't touched the bad side of the law since that time. But we still need to keep an eye on them. And I think that is perfectly appropriate. So for whatever reason, Mr. Jarvis has been required to be on the sex offender registry for at least 28 years now. And I don't know specifically what his violation was. My understanding is that it was a mid-teens victim, maybe 15 years old or so. Whatever it was serious enough at that time for him to go on the registry and to stay on it. And so, yes, I do agree that that is appropriate that he still be on it.
Perfect. And my last question, moving forward, what are you guys going to do? Because I know he was released from jail. Like, is he still operating the farmers market, or?
Well, if he still operates the farmers market, I can tell you this, he will get arrested again. You know, he needs to take it seriously and not get involved, at least not the way he was, maybe in the backside of operations, and he stays in the house and stays away from the kids and or whatever. I'm not even sure that that would be sufficient to consider him in compliance, but he's the one that would have to do, and he can talk to his compliance officer with who works with the state sex offender registry. They can have that discussion about exactly what would be appropriate for him to do. You know, if he's still willing to work at a job, I'm not going to say that he doesn't deserve to have a job and support himself. I think everybody does, even people who have committed horrible crimes. If they're in prison, we are all supporting them. If they're out of prison and willing to work, let's let them work, but it needs to be within certain requirements, and in this case, certain restrictions need to be followed.
Thank you so much, Spencer.
Hey.
Yeah, I'll send that other name if sometime today.
Yeah, text it to me. I'll let you know. I'll give you if we find out that there's a violation there, I'll give you first bite of the apple when if we go anywhere with it. So
there you go. And are those the videos and pictures okay? The Elmo ones?
I told Wendy I'd send her an email.
Okay.
We're not going to put the videos out because I love Elmo for my grandkids. Elmo's funny, you know, Tickle Me Elmo. I laughed like so many other people when Tickle Me Elmo was a big deal. Watching him talk like Elmo made me sick to my stomach. And I thought, I don't know if I could put that on there. So we're not going to release it, but I told Wendy that we may well be using it as evidence. And so not getting it from me, but we will be considering all of what they have on there. And we have downloaded copies of that or done screen recordings of those videos. So we have them as evidence, but if anybody wants those from us, they're going to have to get a grammar request, and we probably won't release them as long as the case is active. But you know, they're public, and it always makes me kind of raise an eyebrow why, you know, your companies require you to get permission. You think in 100 years he would give permission for that to be used by the media? Hell no, he wouldn't, you know?
Yeah, it was weird. I reached out to them last week, and she jumped and was ready to interview, which was also surprising. So yeah. So I don't know.
At that point, I don't think she saw the handwriting on the wall. I mean,
I don't think so. Yeah.
So anyway, but I'll send that email to Wendy. I'll include you in it as well, so that you have it. And I mean, I haven't looked since I posted our stuff on social media. I haven't looked to see what the comments are, but they get pretty hostile and things like this. And you guys see the same thing on your media posts and things. So
yes, yep. So
anyway,
yeah. Well, good luck.
Right. Well, thanks Amanda.
Yeah,
okay,
thank you. Good talking to you.